Feedback. You want to know the one thing that makes a man think about you long after you're gone. It's self-respect. It's emotional detachment, not the kind of detachment that says feedback. I don't care about anyone or anything. But the kind that says, I love myself enough not to beg for what isn't choosing me. That kind of energy is irresistible. You can't fake it. Feedback. You live it. When you start living like your peace is more important than someone else's inconsistent affection, something changes, not just in how they see you, but in how you see yourself. Feedback. Most people don't realize this, but emotional detachment is a quiet form of power. It's not loud. It doesn't need to post on social media. It doesn't come with drama back. It's simply the choice to stop trying to control someone else's behavior. Feedback. It's that deep breath you take when you decide you're not going to send that third message asking why he hasn't replied. Feedback. It's the moment you decide you'll walk away with grace rather than chase someone who's half in, half out. Here's what happens when you start acting from that placing. He notices the shift. Feedback. He might not be able to explain it, but he feels it. He feels that you're no longer emotionally dependent on his validation, and suddenly your energy changes. Feedback. You're no longer giving off that vibe of please pick me. You're now in a place where your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. That is where your power lies. Let me be clear. Feedback. This doesn't mean you play games. This isn't about manipulation or pretending you don't care when you do. Feedback. It's about rooting yourself so deeply in your own worth that you don't allow someone else's inconsistency to uproot you. When you operate from a place of self-respect, feedback. You naturally stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, or trying to convince someone to stay. You understand that love never needs to be begged for. So many people confuse love with attachment. Feedback. They think if they feel that intense pull when someone isn't around, it must mean they're deeply in love. But often that H is just your ego reacting to the withdrawal of attention. Feedback. Real love feels calm. It feels secure. The chaos you're addicted to, that's not love. That's a nervous system that hasn't experienced safety. When a man sees you behaving from a place of confidence, from a place of emotional independence, it forces him to reassess how he's been showing up. Why? Feedback. Because you're no longer giving him the emotional paycheck he's used to collecting. You're not doing the emotional labor for him. You're not filling in the gaps, carrying the conversation. Feedback. Or making excuses for his silence. This isn't about being cold. It's about being warm, but with boundaries. About being open, but not available to inconsistency. Feedback. You can still care about someone and simultaneously decide they're not showing up in a way that deserves your energy. That's a radical act of self-respect. Men are wired to chase. Back, not just in the stereotypical surface level way, but in the deeper sense of valuing what they have to earn. When you hand yourself over too easily, emotionally or physically, feedback, without seeing if the investment is mutual, both of you have the opportunity to grow real respect. Think about it, anything we get too easily, we tend to take for granted. Feedback. It's not because we're ungrateful. It's because we didn't build enough emotional skin in the game. When you pull back, not to punish, not to manipulate, feedback, but because you realize your peace matters more than someone else's confusion, you disrupt cycle. You send the message, I don't chase, I attract. And if you're not showing up, feedback, I'll gracefully step back and create space for someone who will. That's the kind of energy men remember. That's the woman who stays on his mind. Feedback. Long after the ones who try too hard are forgotten, there's something beautifully powerful about a woman who isn't afraid to walk away, who can be fully present when she's with you back, but won't collapse if you disappear. That's the woman who doesn't crumble when a man pulls away, because she doesn't lose herself in someone else's absence. Feedback. A man may not say it out loud, but when he feels that you're not waiting on his return, it forces him to reconsider why he left in the first place. And more importantly, feedback. It makes him wonder whether you'll still be there when he comes back. That uncertainty is exactly what creates desire. Feedback. It's not about punishing him. It's about not pausing your life for anyone who isn't adding value to it. So if you really want to know how to make a man return, feedback. Stop focusing on getting him back. Focus on getting yourself back. Pour into your life your peace. Choose to be happy, not in spite of his absence. Feedback. But because your joy was never supposed to depend on him anyway. Because the truth is, when you act like you're the prize, the right man can't help but circle back. Feedback. And by the time he does, you'll be in a position to decide whether he still qualifies for the life you're building. Feedback. If there's one thing that keeps a man thinking about you long after you've stopped reaching out, it's mystery. Emotional independence and mystery go hand in hand. Feedback. And I don't mean playing hard to get in a glitching way. I'm talking about cultivating a sense of depth that he doesn't get to access all at once. Feedback. When a woman shares her entire emotional world with someone she just started seeing, it doesn't create closeness. It removes curiosity. What makes someone unforgettable is not how much of themselves they pour out away, it's what they withhold in a calm, grounded way. When you have emotional independence, feedback, you don't feel the need to spill everything in order to connect. You trust that what's meant for you will unfold naturally. That trust in yourself is magnetic. And from a man's perspective, feedback, magnetism is addictive because it signals that you're not desperate to be understood or validated. Too often, feedback. We equate emotional openness with vulnerability and forget discernment most the powerful form of self-respect. Not everyone gets to hear your story on the first day. Feedback. Not every man deserves access to the things that shaped you, broke you, or made you strong. You don't have to explain your entire emotional journey to be close with someone. Real intimacy is built over time, not trauma bonded through emotional oversharing. Feedback. When a man senses that you are centered in your emotions, that you don't need him to regulate how you feel, he feels safe and intrigued. Feedback. He sees someone who isn't going to spiral every time he takes a step back. He sees someone who chooses him but doesn't need him. That's the difference. Feedback. Think about how relationships usually begin. There's excitement, chemistry, energy, and often people rush to share everything in order to create closeness fast. But what happens? Feedback. That fast closeness feels intense in the moment, but it burns out. There's no tension, though, intrigue. And without that, desire fades. Model feedback. Men are drawn to women who are still a little unpredictable, not emotionally unstable, but someone who keeps them curious, not because you're playing games. Feedback, but because your life is full enough that you're not sitting around waiting for Hicks' message to feel good about your day. That's why emotional independence is so important. Feedback. It's the foundation of mystery. When you are happy, fulfilled, and regulated on your own, you don't try to force intimacy. You don't chase answers. You don't ask someone feedback. What are we? After 2 weeks, you allow things to unfold naturally because your emotional stability isn't tied to what someone else does or doesn't do. Here's where most people go wrong. Feedback. They confuse availability with connection. Being constantly emotionally available, always answering instantly, always trying to explain how you feel, that doesn't make someone want to be closer. Feedback. It can actually make them feel overwhelmed. It's not about shutting down or being distant. It's about being discerning. Emotionally independent people share from a place of groundedness. Feedback, not anxiety. Honest. Mystery doesn't mean acting like someone you're not. It just means you don't lay out your whole emotional landscape in the first few interactions. Feedback. You let people earn the right to know you. That's how deep lasting connections are built. And in a world where oversharing is often mistaken for openness, be feedback. Being measured and intentional makes you stand out. Men return to women who made them feel something. And the feeling of not quite being able to figure you out is unforgettable. Feedback. When you're emotionally independent, you're not constantly trying to define or label everything. You're not rushing to lock something down. That calm confidence sends the messaging back. I know my worth. I enjoy getting to know someone, but I don't need to grip it so tightly. And here's the thing. Emotional independence doesn't mean emotionally cold. In fact, model feedback. It allows you to be warmer because you're not using someone else to fill a void. You're already full. Feedback. Your emotional world isn't a test someone has to pass. It's a gift they get to experience gradually. And when you reveal it slowly, it has more impact back. When a man knows that you have your own rhythm, your own routines, your own internal world that doesn't revolve around him, it creates a powerful dynamic. Feedback. He starts to pursue, not because you're unavailable, but because you're already whole. He wants to be invited into your life, not absorbed into it. And that distinction is everything. Feedback. You become the one he thinks about when he's alone, the one he compares others to, not because you chased or explained or tried to convince him, but because your mystery lingered. Feedback. Because you never gave too much away too soon. Because your emotional independence created space for him to, I'll want to know more. So when people ask feedback, how do I keep him interested? The answer isn't louder texts, more vulnerability, or constantly checking in. The answer is space. The answer is knowing when to say less. Feedback. The answer is trusting that if something's real, you don't have to flood it with all your emotions to make it grow. The truth is feedback. When you're emotionally independent and leave a little room for him to wonder, you don't just stay on his mind, you are haunted back. You know what always pulls a man back in, even when he thought he'd moved on? It's not begging, it's not chasing, it's not even trying to prove your worth. Feedback. It's the moment he sees that you've glowed up, and not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Feedback. When a man realizes you've outgrown the version of yourself he thought he knew, something shifts in him. Suddenly, he starts questioning if he ever really saw your full value, and more importantly, feedback, if he still qualifies to be part of your new world. This glow up isn't about revenge or making him jealous. That's too small. This is about reclaiming yourself. Feedback, about choosing to become so grounded, so radiant in your own power that whether he's watching or not, you're evolving. And here's the truth when you elevate your life. Feedback. People who didn't appreciate you before start to feel it. You don't even have to say a word. Your presence changes. Your energy speaks louder than any text you could send. And no, feedback. This isn't about getting a haircut and pretending you're fine. It's not about throwing up filtered photos on social media and calling it here, about doing the work. Real feedback, internal work. It's deciding that your peace is more important than the old patterns that kept you stuck. that your goals, your growth, your dreams are worth more than someone's mixed signals back. Here's what happens when you commit to yourself in that way: your standards rise, your time becomes more protected, you stop settling for breadcrumbs and calling it love. Feedback. You stop hoping someone will change, and instead you change the way you show up in your own life. And when you make that shift, people who once took you for granted feel it. Feedback. A man might not consciously realize it, but when he sees you stepping into your full potential, whether it's you starting that business, healing your emotional wounds, feedback, leveling up your friendships, getting in shape, or just radiating joy again, it triggers something in him, not from a place of ego, but from instinct. Because suddenly, feedback, the version of you walked away from is no longer the version that's standing in front of him. And that contrast is powerful. Back. It's easy to take someone for granted when they're stuck in self-doubt. It's easy to overlook someone who's constantly chasing approval. Feedback. But it's nearly impossible to ignore someone who's risen from all of that and is now walking confidence. When you glow up, you create a kind of emotional distance, not because you're cold, feedback, but because you're no longer accessible in the same way. And that distance, that's what makes him come back to check if the door is still open. But here's the key: feedback. You don't glow up for him. You do it for you, because you deserve to live a life that isn't defined by who stayed or who left. Feedback. You deserve to wake up in the morning excited about what you're building, not anxious about whether someone is texting you back. When you make your own happiness the mission, feedback. When your focus is on creating a life you love, the right people naturally gravitate toward that light. And let's be honest, men can sense when a woman has elevated. Feedback. They might not understand it logically, but they feel the shift. The way you carry yourself, the way you speak changes. You no longer tolerate the things you use to excuse. Feedback. That kind of growth doesn't go unnoticed. It's the moment he realizes that the version of you once waited around, who once overgave, who once settled, no longer exists. Feedback. And that realization hits hard. There's a reason men often return after you've healed. It's not coincidence, because they sense your glow before they even see it. Feedback. They feel your detachment, your peace, your self-assuredness, and it challenges them. It makes them reflect. It makes them wonder if they underestimated you. And in many cases they did. But by the time they return, you'll be standing in a very deep place. You'll no longer be asking, why did he leave? You'll be asking, feedback. Does he even fit into the woman I've become? That's the power of the glow up. It's not about proving someone wrong. It's about proving to yourself what was always right about you. Feedback. Even when others couldn't see it, you stop waiting to be chosen, and instead you start choosing yourself over and over again. And that's when everything changes, not just in your love life, feedback, but in every area of your world, because now you're not operating from lack, you're operating from overflow. So if you're sitting there thinking, feedback, I just want him to come back, let me challenge that. What if instead you asked, who do I want to become in this season? What if the goal isn't his return, but your rise? Feedback. What if the ultimate win isn't getting him back, but becoming someone you never again abandon for anyone? Because the truth is, when you glow up for you, he almost always finds his way back. Feedback. The real question is, will you still want him when he does? Feedback. Let's talk about something that so many people get wrong in relationships, especially when they're afraid of losing someone. It's this idea that the more you give, the more someone will stay. Feedback. That if you just love harder, care more, show up more, fix their problems, cook their meals, send long messages, or prove your loyalty, then maybe, just maybe, feedback. They'll finally see your value and stop taking you for granted. But it never works like that. Feedback. Because giving without boundaries doesn't earn respect. It burns you out and teaches the other person that you're always available, no matter how little they invest. Feedback. Men come back because you gave more. They come back when they realize they've lost a woman who stopped overgiving. A woman who stepped back. Feedback. A woman who stopped performing for approval and started protecting her energy. That shift doesn't just change the relationship dynamic, it completely repositions you in his mind. Feedback. One of the most attractive things you can do is set a boundary and stick to it. Because in a world where people are used to getting access to your time, your energy, your attention, feedback, without having to do much to earn it, the woman who says, no, that doesn't work for me, stands out. She becomes unforgettable. Not because she's playing hard to get back, but because she knows her value doesn't come from how much she gives. It comes from how clearly she honors her standards. We've been taught that love is about sacrifice. And yes, feedback, love involves compromise. But it should never mean losing yourself to keep someone else comfortable. That's not love. That's self-abandonment. Feedback. And what happens when you abandon yourself to hold on to someone else? Start to shrink. You silence your needs. You overextend. Feedback. And you start tolerating behaviors that make you question your worth. That's when resentment builds. That's when the relationship becomes unbalanced. Feedback. And that's when they start pulling away, because deep down they can sense that you're not loving yourself in the process. Think about it. Feedback. Have you ever been in a situation where you gave and gave only to feel emptier and more unappreciated? That's not because you're not enough. It's because you were giving from the wrong place. Feedback from fear, giving from insecurity, giving because you thought if you did more, they'd finally give back. But the irony is, the more you overgive, feedback, the less the other person feels the need to show up. Men don't stay for the woman who mothers them, fixes their chaos, or plays therapists. They stay for the woman who expects them to rise, feedback, who doesn't rescue but inspires, who supports but doesn't carry. That woman becomes the mirror that reflects what they're capable of, not the cushion that softens all their bad habits. Feedback. And when a man loses that woman, when she walks away instead of waiting for potential, that's when it hits him. When you stop overgiving, you create space, feedback. Space for him to realize what he actually contributed to the relationship. Space for him to feel the absence of your presence. And most importantly, space for you to reconnect with yourself. Feedback. Because somewhere in the giving, you might have lost your own voice, your own joy, your own sense of what you need. Feedback. That's why boundaries aren't about pushing people away. They're about protecting your own emotional center so you can be in relationships that feel balanced, not burdensome. Back. You become so much more attractive when you stop tolerating disrespect, subtle or obvious, when you don't respond to vague text. Feedback. When you don't rearrange your schedule last minute because he just happened to be free. When you stop explaining over and over how you want to be treated. Feedback. And instead let your silence do the talking. That's when your value becomes clear. That's when you stop being an option and start being a standard. Feedback. And I get it. Sometimes it's scary to stop over giving. It feels like you're risking the connection. Like maybe if you don't keep showing up 100%, it'll fall apart. But ask yourself this feedback. If something falls apart the moment you stop overextending, was it ever really solid? Or were you just holding it all together alone? Healthy love is not one-sided effort. It's mutual. Feedback. It's reciprocal. It's two people who both take responsibility for showing up with intention. And if you're doing all the emotional labor, all the chasing, model feedback. All the accommodating, then you're not in a relationship. You're in performance. So what does this look like in action? It looks like not texting back immediately when he disappears for days. Feedback. It looks like not saying yes, just to avoid conflict. It looks like ending a conversation when it's going nowhere instead of begging for clarity. Feedback. It looks like choosing peace over cause, even when you miss him, even when your heart wants to hold on. Feedback. Because when a man realizes he can no longer walk all over your soft harp, when he feels the absence of your energy, your support, your nurturing, he starts to understand what he lost. Feedback. Because you begged. Not because you fought for it, but because you stopped fighting yourself to keep him. And that's when the return usually happens. Not when you tried harder back, but when you stop trying at all.